Hi there, and thanks for joining us for this late edition of ViuTV News. I'm Patrick Falk. Coming up, Basic Law Committee Chair signals Beijing's impatience at Hong Kong's delay in rolling out national security law. World leaders stand united in fighting Donald Trump's anti-climate change policies at UN conference. Also coming up, Russian lawmakers pass bill to label international media foreign agents as the Moscow-Washington spat heats up. First up, Basic Law Committee Chair Li Fei sparked unease on the first day of his visit to Hong Kong after he called for national security legislation to be introduced here. He said this should be done in accordance with Article 23 of the Basic Law and that the consequences of not implementing any such law since the handover was evident. In a highly anticipated speech during a seminar on the Basic Law at the Wan Chai Convention Centre, Li added Hong Kong is neither independent nor semi-independent. He also slammed independence advocates, saying they are in denial about the central government's authority.
Some people say the Basic Law is Hong Kong's constitution, and they deliberately or unintentionally neglect our country's constitution. Some even say the basis of Hong Kong's constitution comes from the Sino-British Joint Declaration. These are all wrong. Our country is a unified, unitary state with multi-ethnicity. In a unitary state, there can only be one constitution, and that's the Constitution of the People's Republic of China.
Well, there were mixed reactions to Li's remarks. Pro-Beijing DAB veteran Tam Yiu-chung said he didn't think enacting Article 23 would trigger widespread protests like it did 14 years ago. But EXCO member Ronnie Tong thinks the legislation can't be rushed. He said conditions still weren't favourable and that it was unlikely any new legislation would be introduced within the next couple of years. Meantime, education authorities invited local schools to tune in to Li's speech this morning. Let's take a look at what some students had to say.
I was confused when he said the Basic Law comes after China's constitution. Then what's the point of having the Basic Law? It's impossible for us to be 100% attentive no matter what kind of seminar it is. His speech was also in Mandarin. We're not used to it as it's not our language. We missed some parts of it and we couldn't understand everything.
Nowadays, some young people support independence only because they don't understand the Basic Law. Separated sentiment wouldn't hold if they knew more about it.
Carrie Lam echoed Li's comments today, saying the relationship between one country and two systems should be understood correctly. She said separate jurisdictions can only flourish on a solid foundation under China's sovereign rule. The CE also said she was disheartened some people rejected the idea of Hong Kong being part of China and pitted it against the idea of two systems. To the UN climate talks in Germany now, where two of Europe's most powerful leaders applauded efforts to challenge Donald Trump's stance on climate change. German Chancellor Angela Merkel praised efforts by American states and cities to go ahead with the Paris Climate Pact, despite the US president's official withdrawal. Backing Merkel was France's Emmanuel Macron, who said Europe needed to fill the gap left by the US. That included supporting developing nations in cutting their carbon footprint.
The commitment made in Paris of $100 billion per year of support to the developing world from 2020 must be respected. And I was very happy to witness today President Macron saying that even if the US will not implement its commitments on that, Europe should replace the United States. It's absolutely essential that the developing world will have access to the levels of funding that were committed in Paris.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is still enjoying the afterglow of his recent Asian trip, telling his country the world saw a strong, proud and confident America. Addressing the media at the White House, Trump said America's future has never been brighter, highlighting his talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping on trade and North Korea. He said Xi agreed to use his great economic influence over the regime to achieve the common goal of a denuclearized Korean peninsula.
I also had a very candid conversation with President Xi about the need to reduce our staggering trade deficit with China and for our trading relationship to be conducted on a truly fair and equitable basis. We can no longer tolerate unfair trading practices that steal American jobs, wealth, and intellectual property. The days of the United States being taken advantage of are over.
To Russia now, where a spat with Washington over allegations of Moscow's meddling in American politics is spilling over to hit journalists. The country's lower house of parliament has passed a bill to label international media as foreign agents, potentially affecting their operations. Jacob Greaves reports.
Russia has taken a step towards targeting foreign media. Draft legislation could see news outlets labelled foreign agents, with their ability to operate independently hindered. The country's lower house of parliament giving their approval on Wednesday. It would mean media organisations might have to disclose where they get their funding and how they spend it. It comes amid a spat between Moscow and Washington over the Kremlin allegedly meddling in America's presidential election. Just this week, the US took action against the Russian state broadcaster RT, labelling its American-based affiliate a foreign agent. The Kremlin decried the move as an attack on free speech. Now Moscow could be set to respond in kind, and it has form in using the label foreign agent. A 2012 law targeted non-governmental organisations receiving money from abroad. It meant submitting regular funding reports and being subject to spot checks by authorities. As a result, some NGOs ceased operating in Russia. The draft law plans to set the same regulations for international media outlets, and it will next need approval from the upper house. But ultimately, it will be President Vladimir Putin who gets the final say on whether it passes.
Up next, we have business news. Let's start by taking a look at what happened today on Hong Kong's stock markets. A good session for investors from the looks of it. The Hang Seng Index added around 0.6% to finish at 29,018 points. Tech shares continue to drive the performance of the markets. Today it was in the wake of excellent earnings from Tencent. Investor appetite for the sector shows little sign of slowing down at the moment. IPOs here might have something to do with that. Chinese online car retailer Yixin, the latest to add its name to the share offering list. The company, which is backed by Tencent, JD.com and Baidu, soared in its IPO today by as much as 32% at one point before finishing up around 7%. Growing enthusiasm for tech stocks in Hong Kong is seen as partly behind the rise. Since it was created from another online car seller in 2014, Yixin has grown into one of the largest online hubs for trading new and second-hand cars, as well as auto news. Its IPO is the third largest by an internet business in Hong Kong this year. Well, fresh government data showed Hong Kong's unemployment dipped to a 20-year low. It's now at 3%, off a tenth of a percent compared to the last quarter. That amounts to a decline of around 4,600 jobs. Most of the losses were in the import and export, as well as the financial services industries. The underemployment rate, meanwhile, kept steady at 1.1%. Officials say the labour market is expected to remain a little tight in the short term. Same with cars in China, and Volkswagen's new country chief says the company is planning on spending close to $12 billion on so-called new energy vehicles. China has tough production quotas for these type of vehicles that have to be met by 2019, forcing car makers to double down on green power. Joachim Heinzmann said he was confident VW and its local partners could generate enough sales to hit their targets. Amid the flurry of tech interest and green car plans, worries are growing about China's financial sector. A government official has warned the country faces bubble risks because of its reliance on the industry. Cheap money has helped fuel growth, but credit is growing faster than the economy. Huang Qifan, the deputy chairman of the Economic and Finance Committee under the National People's Congress, said a property tax may be on the cards to cool the market. China's government is in the second year of a crackdown on speculative investment and high corporate debt levels. Up in the sky, Airbus has been lifted after a record deal. The company landed orders for 430 of its A320neo family jets. And as Sylvia Antonolia reports, some investors reckon budget airlines could soon rewrite the rulebook on big buys with bargain fares and optional fees.
Airbus execs are flying high in Dubai. They've landed a record deal to sell 430 planes for up to $50 billion at the annual air show. The buyer is US investors Bill Franke, the owner of Indigo Partners. The 80-year-old is splashing the cash to supply A320neo jets to 4 airlines in which he has stakes: Frontier Airlines, Volaris, JetSmart and Wizz Air.
The negotiating teams on both sides, I think, did a fantastic job for Airbus and for the airlines involved.
Airbus might have backed the biggest price, but there has been a flurry of deal-making at the popular industry gathering, as airlines take advantage of a recent dip in demand for new planes to get better prices. One of the latest announcements is from Boeing and Fly Dubai.
We are announcing today a commitment for an order valued at $27 billion for 225 Boeing 737 MAX 8, 9 and 10 aircrafts.
Budget airlines got the lion's shares of the action in Dubai, but that, for some, is a worry.
The budget airline business runs on wafer-thin margins. It's all about efficiency. And one wonders how sustainable that business is, given the recent wave of bankruptcies, given the threat of rising interest rates. So whilst they're big numbers at the moment and very, very exciting deals, it wouldn't surprise me at all if these were modified and reduced throughout the lifetime of the order.
Indeed, the job now for Airbus and Boeing is to make sure that these preliminary deals come to fruition, or there might be still some rough landings to come.
OK, now, when it comes to selling, few things get the pulses racing as much as an auction. The thrill of bidding is something some of us have experienced, although perhaps not when it comes to artwork worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, most people will have heard of Leonardo da Vinci, even if they don't know anything about his portrait of Jesus Christ. It's one of fewer than 20 paintings done by the Italian genius, and it sold yesterday at Christie's in New York for more than $450 million. That's